What's up everyone, welcome to another camera comparison video. And actually I've been doing camera comparison for almost 2 years now. I have done more than 100 camera comparison videos and I have more than 40,000 subscribers. I feel that I am bound to provide my subscribers and viewers with true content. Okay, here are my smartphones, so let's start this comparison. But before that, at the end, if you like this video, then please share this video on your social network, I mean Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Please support true content. Let's start with bokeh photos, cause this is the most interesting part of this comparison. Both of these two depends on the main sensor for portrait photos as there is no telephoto lens. When I compare portrait photos, I care about bokeh effect, edge detection, amount of textures processed in the subject and the separation line. After checking a lot of portrait photos taken by these two smartphones, it is clear that there is a difference in white balance and tonal contrast. Poco F3 slightly saturates the color and surprisingly, white balance is a bit warm. Poco F2 Pro on the other hand kept things cool and color rendition is a bit better than Poco F3. I always mention in all of my camera comparison videos, and yes, a lot depends on personal preference, but I think here in this portrait comparison, even with strong preference for certain aspects will not change the choice. Poco F2 Pro did way better. Edge detection, edge cutouts and separation line blend. Performance is consistently better on Poco F2 Pro, while Poco F3 most of the time has clearly fell behind. Details and dynamic range is also a bit better on Poco F2 Pro. Yes, in indoor dark environment, it may seem like Poco F3 produced brighter images, but if you check carefully, you will see very high ambience, vibrance and crushed shadows, which actually ruins the real vibe of a portrait. Yeah, this is the beginning of this comparison and I think Poco F2 Pro has already started to prove its class. In real life usage, main sensor photos are more important than portraits. This is a clear downgrade. Poco F2 Pro got a better Sony IMX686 64 megapixel sensor and Poco F3 got a Sony IMX 582 48 megapixel sensor. Let me clearly mention all of these pictures were taken on auto mode with AI enabled and HDR was set to auto. Of course, both of these two smartphones have Pro mode, so if you have the time to dial in and switch between options to get a perfect shot of your choice, then you can, but most of the general users uses auto mode and I think this represents true pros and cons of the smartphones. Now I wanna ask you a question. Does numbers matter? At least in this comparison numbers matters, cause the bigger the better sensor actually performed better. The main difference continues to be in white balance and before you make any judgment. Poco F2 Pro color temperature is actually neither warm nor cool, it's almost on the perfect line. But you must understand Poco F2 Pro camera performance wasn't very good when it was released and things got better through a few software updates. So we can expect that Poco F3 camera performance will get better after a few updates, but we have to be realistic about a 2 years old sensor. Poco F3 rendered colors with a bit saturation and this makes things punchier and lucrative, which turns the images to stand out. It's almost social media ready. But Poco F2 Pro with good exposure, better dynamic range and contrast portrays reality. Even if it's not as good as any other flagship of 2021, it is far better than Poco F3. For me, the most important part is details, textures and shadows, cause while editing you cannot add these. In terms of details, Poco F2 Pro is well ahead. It even processed more textures with sharpness and side by side, Poco F3 photos rather looks a bit soft. Once again, a lot depends on personal preference. Leave a comment and let me know what's your preference. The first thing you would notice in ultra-wide photos is field of view. FOV is a bit wider on Poco F2 Pro. Also, Poco F2 Pro got a bigger 13 megapixel sensor for ultra-wide shots and Poco F3 got a pretty ordinary 8 megapixel sensor underneath that ultra-wide lens. Have you already noticed that no matter whether outdoor or indoor, Poco F3 kept the trend of warm tone and Poco F2 Pro has also kept the trend of slightly increased highlights in ultra-wide photos. From outdoor to indoor and Poco F3 started to overexpose in search of brightness. This issue is really nothing big cause I think with a software update this will get tuned. But like all other Xiaomi smartphones, both of these two smartphones failed to detect light source well lit areas. That makes it apply the same highlights and contrast through the image, which sometimes makes the focus, the subject, either hidden in shadows or crushed with the shadows. Of course, there are a few differences, like white balance and saturation, skin tone in outdoor environment under bright daylight and in indoor environment under low light changes randomly. Details and textures jumps back and forth, but most of the time, I would say Poco F2 Pro has managed to grab more details. Neither Poco F2 Pro nor Poco F3 have that precious telephoto lens. This year almost all the brands got rid of telephoto lens on budget smartphones. Last year Redmi K30 Pro Zoom had a pretty nice telephoto lens for 3x optical zoom. I feel like it's a clear downgrade. Okay, this is a 5x digital zoom image and I think this isn't an image that we can share on social media. Both failed to produce quality, but after cropping in, we can see F2 Pro actually did better. Definitely, with a better sensor and bigger pixel size, Poco F2 Pro gets more details and textures. I would say up to 3x zoom, both are somewhat usable, but after that photos get too blurry and soft. As both used its main sensor, you can see white balance and color grading is similar to those usual pixel bin photos. If you check for other attributes, then no, you are not gonna find a lot of differences. We need to do pretty heavy pixel peeping and nitpicking to get any other differences. But clearly, Poco F2 Pro is ahead. These are night mode photos, and this is really a bit tricky cause at a glance, performance of Poco F2 Pro seems quite similar to Poco F3, but if we put a bit of effort, then we can find a lot of differences. Despite its warm tone and saturation, huge number of shadow details got my attention. I am talking about photos taken with Poco F3. This is different than Redmi K40. I think you already know that Redmi K40 and Poco F3 actually is the same smartphone with different names. Anyway, while K40 night mode photos sucks, Poco F3 truly put up a good fight against Poco F2 Pro. I cannot deny that Poco F2 Pro actually did better on color rendition. Yes, in terms of color grading and white balance, of course Poco F2 Pro is better, but when we crop in, we can see there is a big difference. Poco F3 in most of the images actually processed more textures. Whole image is sharper with more details in the shadows. In night mode photos, two things are very important. First, noise removing algorithm. Second, identifying well lit areas. None of these two smartphones has managed to do these things correctly. Moving on to selfie camera, and there isn't any drastic difference in performance. Poco F2 Pro continued to produce photos with more details and textures, while Poco F3 applied a bit heavier skin smoothing beauty effect. Color rendition and skin tone is also better on Poco F2 Pro. In good lighting condition or in bright daylight, both of these two generated good selfie images, but under low light, both struggled a bit. If we do some nitpicking, then once again, I have to choose Poco F2 Pro cause it produces images with more textures and there are more shadow details. These are selfie portraits and skin smoothing beauty effect got heavier. I mean, even if you turn it off, there is some sort of skin smoothing. I am actually happy to see both of these two budget smartphones produced very good selfie portraits. In terms of edge detection, separation, line blend and details, both are pretty similar, but after checking a lot, I think this older Poco F2 Pro has a bit better bokeh effect and also managed to get better edge detection. This is another set of clips recorded with the front sensor. I will leave this for you. Check carefully which one is better. Also, don't forget to check ambient sound to determine which microphone works better. These video clips are recorded at 1080p 30 frames per second. If you don't know yet, then none of these two smartphones got OIS and depends on EIS for stabilization. I think both did similar, but definitely there are more jitteriness in the clip recorded with Poco F3. Dynamic range is better on Poco F2 Pro. Not only that, skin tone is also close to reality and colors are vibrant and true to life. Okay, it's time to wrap up. And the truth is, I feel Poco F2 Pro is still better than this Poco F3. Yeah, Poco F3 is not a camera-centric smartphone. It's a performance-oriented budget smartphone. But if you are thinking about camera, then Poco F2 Pro is definitely better than Poco F3. What do you think? Don't forget to leave a comment and let me know your thoughts. Also, if you have liked this video, then please click on the like button and please subscribe to this channel.